Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Proposed electricity tariffs by Eskom might allow residential consumers to only be charged for what they use. If approved by NERSA, customers would be able to manage electricity consumption during peak hours. Joining us to tell us how the proposal is likely going to work is Dr. Andrew Dickson, an engineering executive at CBI-Electric. Very good evening to you, Dr. Dickson. Thank you so much for your time. Perhaps give us a bit more depth on this new structure and what it will look like should it be able to come into effect.
Evening, Paul. Thank you for having me. So there are a couple of things that are coming around with the proposed tariffs, and we've got to be very careful to not mix things too much. But you've got time of use tariffs that are being introduced or are being proposed, and that would look at when I use electricity, how much will it cost me? On the other side of it is when I have infrastructure available to me. So this is where they're proposing if I've got solar on my roof or other means of generating energy, I would have to pay into Eskom to allow me to still have access to the grid. So there are a couple of ideas that are floating, and each of these is going to have a different type of impact on the homeowner. And that's what people are concerned about, is where am I going to be paying for what and when? I think still the biggest is probably going to be the time of use tariff that will come in. So if I use a lot of electricity in the morning and a lot of electricity at night, I'm going to be charged more. If I use it at off-peak times, I'm going to get it at slightly lower rates. And this, though, does lend itself for you to be able, in order for you to be able to sell energy back into the grid, and it's going to come at a price break that should be competitive, but we don't know what those final sort of values are looking like. The other side of that is the capacity of what the grid can supply to you, and this is where people, particularly putting solar panels on their roofs, are very worried, is if I put solar onto my roof, but I have a rainy day or a time where I can't generate, I need to access power from the grid, but Eskom is saying you're going to pay for that benefit, and we've got to see how those structures come about.
So how would this new structure then work for those who may be on prepaid electricity, where they are, in all essence, monitoring consumption irrespective of the different time frames at which the new change will bring?
So the new change, and particularly the time of use tariffs, would fundamentally be loaded onto the prepayment meters. So they will know when you're consuming power and will charge you accordingly. So they will also see the time of use coming in. They, again, though, just have the benefit of prepaying. They won't run up a debt, an exceptionally high bill at the end of the month. They obviously will just run out of the capacity to be able to use electricity and would have to go and buy another token. So those time of uses will still come into effect because it's what Eskom will mandate through the system.
So how then would you advise that consumers can curb consumption and costs and, really looking at taking costs down, especially in the current climate, because there are a lot of concerned people about what this will mean for their month-to-month electricity consumption?
So it's like everything. It's like fuel prices. Fuel prices keep on going up. How do you stop using more fuel? Well, there are a couple of options that you have available, same with electricity. The first thing you need to know is how much am I consuming? So the ability to see what all of your loads are doing, not just your total consumption, because again, people see the meter running. Again, many people, particularly prepayment meters, you can see the little red light flashing, and the faster it flashes, the more you're consuming. You know when you're running your geyser, you know when you're running your stove, it's drawing a lot of power. Now, you either have to move when you're going to draw that power. So if I've got a time of use tariff, which is very high in the evening when I'm obviously trying to cook, you've either got to prepare your meal earlier and eat earlier, or you've got to say, I'm preparing it in the morning, and then I only need to use a little bit of electricity in the evening to heat it up. But from sort of understanding, you've got to measure what you're doing. Then you can start to bring in some control. So there are a lot of smart devices out and available these days. Get hold of one of those, and you can start to switch under either a let's call it a glorified timer version. So in the old days, you would pre-program a timer for, say, your geyser to come on. It would come on for a couple of hours during the day. You would then turn it off. Now, with an app and your smart devices, you can sit and say, I want it to come on for half an hour before I shower, then go off for most of the rest of the day, and then come on again in the evening.
I think you may have muted yourself. If you could perhaps unmute. Are you still there?
No, I'm still here.
Okay,
my mute is still good, sorry.
Okay, perhaps let's talk about, the impact of multiple appliances being on standby. You speak about technology, which is a great idea, and I suppose it would encourage people and household owners to go out and research and try and find out how to automate, high consumers like the geyser and other appliances.
So you've got two things there. One is obviously your big consumers, your geysers, your stoves, your pool pumps, anything that runs a heavy element will cost you a lot of money. And so it's the ability to control when and where those should be on and off. That's the one element. On the other side of it, everyone has a laptop, a TV, a audio system of some sort. All of these in standby mode draw power. And what we forget is that that's all the time, 24/7. If I can remove some of those from the actual system, then I begin to shave off a couple of kilowatts here or there, or basically that comes around to rands and cents in your pocket. So you can use the technology to take off large amounts of sort of phantom loads and be able to then only turn them on when you actually need them, saving you electricity on a minute-by-minute basis.
And what about poorer households, Dr. Dickson? How are they going to now try and navigate around this to ensure that they too can afford to have electricity in their homes?
That's a tricky one. Obviously, the poorer households, you tend to have less requirements from you're not going to have a pool pump. You may be in the position to have a geyser, but it's usually a smaller geyser, smaller element. But that doesn't mean you're being charged anything less by Eskom. So you need to then look at it and say, when do I need to use that object? And then ultimately you become the person who's in control of that. So you say, instead of leaving my geyser on all day, or necessarily always cooking everything, you've got to shift how you approach the use of energy. Lighting, everyone needs lights. Kids, irrespective of where they are at school, what they're doing, obviously you need light in order to be able to study. And therefore you've got to look at what options do I have available from a lighting system. You can get down to as low as 3 watt CFLs at this stage. So how do I just take those little elements off? And yes, there are costs associated with making that change. But in the long term, once you've got into the habit of it, you will save money.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion, Dr. Andrew Dickson, and an engineering executive at CBI-Electric, speaking about the use of technology. It could help save and help consumers and the national grid with Eskom's new proposed tariff, which could come into effect. As we know, NERSA has until the 7th of November to make those final decisions.